This is the CD player in Barbados. This is.
Okay, you got it. Good evening, I'd like to call to order the North Branford Planning and Zoning regular meeting for April 3rd at 6:36 p.m. Please join me in saluting the flag. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We just roll right into it, Bill. 6:36. That's not bad.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Right. At this point, I'd like to introduce the members of the commission seated here tonight. To my left is Bill Gondenzi, our vice chair. To his left is Ron Cian, our regular member. And seated to his left is Mary Crusoe. Nice to see you.
Thanks.
And to his left, her left is Chris Cian, another regular member. I'm sorry, Mary Crusoe is an alternate member to the commission tonight. To my right is Janet Crane, our recording secretary, who's trying to get it to record. And at the administrative table is David Perkins, our town planner. Finally, my name is Robert Nowak. I'm the chairman for the commission seated here tonight. Next order of business we have on the agenda is to review the minutes from January 2nd, 16th, and March 20th. I'd ask some commission members to take a moment to review them if you haven't already. Let me know if you have any corrections, adjustments, or modifications you'd like to make, and then when you're ready, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as noted. We have January 2nd we can do. January 16th, we're short berries, so we're going to table January 16th, and we can do March 20th.
Can we do them separately? I mean, if it makes a difference, because I have to abstain from 20th, I wasn't here.
Right.
But
No, we'll do them
January
individually.
2nd, yeah, okay. The 2nd I can approve.
My motion, we accept the minutes for January 2nd.
We have a motion, do you have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Ron, second by Bill. Any discussion? Okay, this is for the approval of minutes, January 2nd. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Abstained? Abstained?
Abstained.
Well, I wasn't even
I
a
wasn't, you
member
weren't
yet.
member,
Yeah,
so-
you were a member.
Yeah, so we, yeah.
Just abstained.
Abstain.
Fair enough. Okay, motion carries 3. Yes. Who moved? We had Ron and Bill. Okay, next is January 16th. We're going to table that one. Then March 20th, we have Paul, Chris, actually Paul's not here. So we have Chris, Ron, and myself for March 20th.
So on page 7, second paragraph down, Town Planner Perkins will update the language of the district codes. He will plan to attend their next meeting to present it to them and get their feedback. I think it should say he will plan to attend the next EDC meeting to present it to them and get their feedback.
So on page 3, first paragraph, I'd be happy to meet with you about meet, change the word from M-E-E to M-E-T. Same page, page 3, 7, other business. Form-based code address the relationship between buildings and the public realm, which is said, which is to say. So we want to get rid of, it should say, which is to say, remove the word which is redundant twice. Like repeated. page 8 at the bottom, I don't know if I volunteered to have a table. I don't know if Barry and I both volunteered to do that.
No, I
I
don't
think
think we
that's
did.
the-
I think the
Considered
Wetlands
it.
Commission did, though.
Right. I don't know if I volunteered to have a table. I don't remember saying that. Do you, Chris? Do you guys remember that? I don't know. Consider it. I thought volunteered to consider. I don't know if I want to bring up the chickens.
Don't,
I have a table for just chickens.
yeah.
Page 9, also St. Joseph's Day is Father's Day in Italy, capital J for St. Joseph's, please.
And I guess we could do page 6, C12. It talks about painting establishments in binderies, should be painting establishments and binderies. And I think on the page 7, in the middle where Member Marino talks about regulation for any business to apply for a permit, that's just a little wordy in there. I'm not going to change anything. It just
Okay.
seems a little odd.
Yeah, it looks, Dave, like it's almost word for word, some of this. Yeah, okay. Kathleen did a good job anyway. No criticism towards her.
And it could be the next one down, Town Planner Perkins stated that you would put it under a list of not allowed uses, and it would fall right after 23-2-7. It could be 23-28.
You want to change it to after?
Yeah. And then it could be 23-2-8.
else, Dave? Anybody else?
We just need a motion.
Can I make a motion to approve with
You all set now?
above changes, or the
Are
changes?
you all set?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Second.
Motion by Chris, second by Ron. Any further discussion? Hearing none, then, all in favor of the motion, the minutes as revised, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed and abstain?
Stay.
Okay, motion carries.
You need to amend the agenda.
But,
To amend the agenda,
yes,
I'm gonna make a motion.
Okay.
I move to amend the agenda to add under old business, the lighting plan for Stefani Drive. It's called Drive, Stefani's Way.
We have a second?
Oh, second.
Okay. Motion to amend the agenda. Motion by Bill, second by Ron. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Who else to speak to this?
so after we approved the subdivision, one of the conditions was that they come back with a lighting plan for the proposed public street. Our regulations state that they need to be every 450 feet, which basically puts one halfway down and one at the cul-de-sac. What's proposed is in front of you, Wallingford Electric will put a light on the pole on Old Post Road.
Yep.
And then there'll be a street light, say about 300 feet down on the right-hand side, another street light, another 300 feet on the left-hand side, and then another one at the end. So you'll have 3 street lights plus the one on the pole. Seems to meet the requirements. You have what the light's gonna look like, which is sort of
Yeah.
a contemporary residential oldie type looking light.
Nicer than the other two. My opinion.
Dave, the requirement is cul-de-sac with sidewalk, cul-de-sac with a sidewalk is 300 feet, if I remember correctly, right?
It's 450 feet, but it can be reduced to 300 if the town manager requests that, or if the applicant just does it, then that's fine.
No, I actually think it's 300 feet. With sidewalks. Literally. With sidewalks. I agree it's 450, but with sidewalks, I believe it's 300 feet. That's why there's 300 on here.
Okay. All right. And I think that's got the town manager's authorization as well, but he's meeting the requirement, so.
Good. Yeah, sounds good.
Dave, if I remember correctly, you had a conversation with him with the type of pole and worked that all out?
Yeah.
Do we want to consider doing something like that in the future for consistency throughout the town? Of what kind of pole and stanchion, or just leave it as a subject to the developer if we do these again?
I suppose we could change the subdivision regulations so it's in there.
Okay,
I mean, we have conflicts between the subdivision regulations and the town street ordinance already, so we should probably clean it up,
right.
right? Because the town, the width of the road in the subdivision regulations is wider than it is in the street policy ordinance adopted by the town council.
Right, and that's what I'm referring to.
Right,
The 300 feet is in the town council ordinance for lighting.
exactly.
Okay. Okay.
So, getting any of those things out of the regulations and out of the ordinance and just refer to a document makes it a whole lot easier because we can just change the document
Yeah.
without changing the ordinance or the regulations. Just refer to the town engineering. And so the planning and zoning uses the same book that the town does.
That makes it so much easier.
Yep.
Right.
And we don't have to change our regs and have a public hearing every time we want to do something else. Okay, cool. I like it. Commissioners have any questions, concerns about the lighting and the layout?
Nope. Is this a motion thing, or?
Yeah, I'd make a
It is?
motion.
Okay. I move to approve the lighting design and layout for Stefani's Way.
Do we have a second for the motion to approve the lighting as discussed?
I'll second that.
All right. Motion by Bill, second by Mary. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Just for the record, I didn't do this at the beginning. Mary Caruso's seated as a regular member instead of an alternate member today, so your vote does count. So thank you. Okay. Back to our regular scheduled programming. All right. We don't have anything for public hearing. We have modified old business. There's no new business, and we're moving on to other business with a presentation by David Fink at SCROG, referring to affordable housing presentation. Hi.
Hi, how are you? Excuse me. Just getting over a upper respiratory thing, but I'm fine. I have some handouts, so if you don't mind, I'll hand those
That'll
out
be
to
fine.
everybody.
Yep, please.
Dave, when you sit down, would you introduce yourself for the record?
Oh, sure. I'm David Fink, and I'm the housing policy consultant for the South Central Regional Council of Governments. I've been doing that for about 5 years. This is the 5th year. So.
Thank you,
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
Well, thank you very, very much for inviting me. Needless to say, I'm here because housing is a huge issue around the state and in all the towns in the state. So we thought at SCROG that it was important to offer the opportunity to towns to come, if you have questions, be happy to answer them, offer you some information. I have always made it a policy, because before I did this for SCROG for 5 years, I was a consultant other place. You may have overheard me say to Dave, I've tried to retire a couple of times and failed. But I've been to a lot of towns. Before that, I was the policy director for the Partnership for Strong Communities for 13 years. So I've been doing housing stuff for about 22 years. The housing situation in the state is difficult, to say the least, because we've had huge run-up in prices and not a lot of supply. So the demand has outstripped the supply. The basic numbers are on this sheet that I gave you. Since the beginning of before the pandemic in 2019 through 2023, single-family prices rose about 60% statewide. And then in 2024, they went up another 10%. So what that did was it moved a lot of people in the low to middle of the income spectrum who couldn't pay cash. It moved them into the rental market. So rental prices went up 22% between 2019 and 2023, and again, a little more now. And that, the ripple effect, caused an increase in homelessness because people at the low end of the rental spectrum got out. So the legislature is probably going to try to do something this year, but as you know, housing is very controversial. People are very concerned about how additional housing in the community will impact the community and change it. I am not among the radical housing advocates that you might meet up at the Capitol. I believe towns need to make their own decisions about housing. I don't believe that the legislature should mandate it. But zoning commissions like yours all over the state are getting not only interested and educated, but involved with their residents to understand what are the housing needs that we have and how can we meet them. And as you guys deal with all the time, where should we put that new housing? And the difficulty is, in a lot of towns, I don't know how many of you took behavioral psychology in college, but you learn one of the prime motivators is fear of loss. People don't want to lose their friends and their family, but their quality of life, their community, their neighborhood, and they're afraid that if you add housing, that's going to change the town. And I understand that, and your town has been one of the towns of Sprague that has availed itself of a service that we've offered, which is facilitating community conversations, and that's been going on here in North Branford. Because I believe that most residents in town, when they buy their home, that's the largest check they ever write. And so it's not irrational for them to worry because their house, everything's tied up in that house, their family security, their kids' education, their retirement. It's not irrational for them to worry about who's moving into town and where are they going. So what we've tried to do is meet with the towns, talk about housing, answer questions, maybe disabuse people of misconceptions they have about the impact on school enrollments and crime and property values, because there's a lot of research and anecdotal evidence that speaks to those issues. And basically try to help towns, if they want it, I haven't been to every town, understand better what their options are. Like I said, I'd never tell a town what to do. It's not my place to tell a town what to do. And even if it was, I wouldn't know enough about the town. But I will tell you what other towns are doing, and I'm going to try to do that tonight. And maybe some of that information will be relevant to you. You may think that's a good idea. It may apply here, it may not. So the first thing I gave you, this is Sprague's fact sheet, which we issued last month about North Branford. As you know, people are burdened by their housing costs when they have to pay more than 30% of their income on housing. When I was a kid getting my first apartment, my folks told me, don't spend more than 25% of your income on housing each month because you need money left over for food and clothing and transportation and health care. HUD has always put it at 30%. There are a lot of people in the state, because housing prices have risen so much, who are burdened by their housing costs. They are spending more than 30% of their income on housing. You can see in Branford about 42% of your renters and 31% of your homeowners are spending more. What does that mean? It doesn't mean they're homeless. It means they're spending a lot on housing, which is probably not good for them because they have little left over for those other necessities. It's not really good for local merchants because they don't have as much disposable income. And it's probably not good for the state sales tax revenues because when they spend money, sales tax revenue goes to the state. So it's in the state's interest to help towns create housing. Like I said, there are bills, have been bills the last few years, to mandate that towns create a certain number of units. I don't think they'll pass. They haven't passed in the last few years. I don't think Governor Lamont would sign a bill like that, because he believes, like I do, that towns need to make their own decisions about it. But, as I say, towns are finding good reasons to do it. I have been to a bunch of the economic development commissions in towns in the region. I was to your economic development commission. Employers are very interested in housing creation because they can't find labor pool. You know, a lot of employers are small employers. The guy who makes your latte in the morning at 6:30 and got up at 5 to get there at 6 to turn on the coffee machines, he's probably making $2 or $3 over minimum wage. And at that salary level, that's hard to afford housing. So a lot of the people we need aren't making a lot of money, but we need them in town. It used to be that employers could attract workers from 4 or 5 towns over, but given the number of open jobs in the state, which has been estimated to be 90, 100,000 open jobs, they can find a job closer to home. They don't need to drive 3 or 4 towns over to get a job. So employers are interested in labor pool in the town that they can tap into. And we're seeing, you know, some big employers, but mostly smaller employers who can't afford to raise wages to attract workers from other towns. Towns have other needs for housing, obviously. I don't know if you have surveyed elderly residents in town, but you know, a lot of people, their kids are gone, they don't want to shovel the snow or rake the leaves anymore. They would like to downsize, they would like the town to have downsizing opportunities, but they can't sell their house now because there's no place for them to go. And they don't want to go to another town. They've lived in the town for 30 or 40 years, and their church and their dock and their family and friends are here. And so they need housing. Young professionals, young workers, you know, kids, my kids are millennials. They want, you know, in a lot of cases, don't want a 4-bedroom colonial on a 1-acre lot. And a lot of them are burdened by education costs. The average education debt for kids in this state is $36,800. And if you've gone to private school or any kind of graduate school, it's probably north of that. So even if they can get a mortgage, they don't want it. They would like a multifamily, you know, an apartment or maybe a condo. So you have elderly people who need housing needs, downsizing baby boomers, millennial children, and then you want your workers to also have a place. So towns have a lot of housing needs, and they're thinking about it. It gets deterred, however, in a lot of towns, because a lot of people say, well, if you allow multifamily housing, it's going to look ugly, and the people who live in it are going to be bad neighbors, and it's going to increase school enrollments, and it's going to lower neighboring property values, and it's going to increase crime and traffic. A lot of that is just not borne out by experience. For example, Rutgers did all the research. It's been borne out in town after town that school enrollments, if you get you develop a 1-bedroom apartment, you get on average 0.04 public school age children, or 4 for every 100 1-bedroom apartments you have. And when you think about it, it makes sense. How many parents are going to live in a 1-bedroom apartment with a child? 2-bedroom apartment, you get 0.27, or 1 for every 4, because in a 2-bedroom apartment, usually it's 2 singles sharing, or grandma who wants a 2nd bedroom when the grandkids come for the weekend, or a couple who wants a 2nd bedroom as an office/guest room. 1 out of 4 times, it's a child and a parent. 3-bedroom apartments, you start getting more, 1.38. But the point is, you don't get a lot. School budgets are not really been found to be sensitive to enrollment. They're sensitive to labor and healthcare and energy costs. And so that's kind of a red herring. But people raise it, and it's okay for them to raise it, because their tax money, they're thinking, might have to pay for, you know, educating more kids. So it's good to have that discussion and talk about it. Same thing with property values. MIT did the research on that. Multifamily housing doesn't lower neighboring property values. I mean, obviously, if you put a 20-story apartment house in a beautiful 2-acre zone with, you know, $1 million houses, it might cause some people to not want those homes, but it doesn't on, you know, if you're reasonable about where you put it. And, you know, there's plenty of anecdotal evidence that the people and testimonials from police chiefs and mayors that the people who live in income-restricted units are not drug dealers and gang leaders. They're just workers who don't make a lot of money. I went through, when I was at the Partnership for Strong Communities, Department of Labor website, I was surprised to find there are 683 different occupations in Connecticut, and half of them don't make what is called the housing wage. And you'll see that here. The housing wage in Connecticut is what you have to earn an hour to afford a typical two-bedroom apartment. Well, as you can see, you have to earn about $35 an hour, or about $74,000 a year, to afford the typical two-bedroom apartment in Connecticut, again, because of the rise in rental prices. So, you know, the issue ultimately is that public servants like you will hear from a lot of people at public hearings when you have development proposals that it's going to cause crime and it's going to raise school costs, but you know, we're here to tell you, and we can give you more information if you need it, that you know, you're the ones who will have perspective and understand what it costs to rent or buy a place and what people make actually, and have the perspective to understand that if you want your employers to have workers, if you want your teachers and public safety officers to live in town, if you want your empty nesters to be able to downsize, and you'll understand their income levels, it's just important to understand the relationship between housing costs and what people actually earn. Some people don't recognize that guy at Starbucks in the morning making a latte, they don't realize how little money he's making. So that's the situation in Connecticut. I wanted to tell you that, about what some other towns are doing, so you might be interested. I was in Madison in February, and they're having another meeting tonight. Their zoning commission has decided they will take the lead in community meetings about housing. So they had 70 people come to their senior center at the end of February. They're going to have another meeting tonight in the north part of Madison at a church there, so that they can have people who live in that part of town come. They want to hear from the residents in town. What do you think our housing needs are? What would you like to see? And there are issues in every town. If you know Madison, you know their town center has ball fields in them. At the last meeting, some people said, well, we shouldn't have so many athletic fields in the town center. Other people said, no, we should. Well, they got to set, you know, that's the key issue. If you need more housing for particular constituencies, where do you put it? Do they put it on Route 1? Do they put it in other places in town? Or do they put it in the town center? Towns have to come to grips with it. But I mention it only because the zoning commission in that town decided to take a lead. Other towns have created affordable housing committees of residents who have, I've talked to a bunch of them, they've educated themselves on housing issues and have kind of fostered communication in town, again, to hear from the residents. Because, you know, ideally, you don't want people to feel like housing's going to get shoved down their throat. You want them to have some input about what's needed. And people are pretty good about it. They may not know everything about it, but it's good to hear that. A lot of towns are having those kinds of meetings. Like I said, I've been to a bunch of economic development commissions: Woodbridge, Branford, Madison, Wallingford, Guilford, your economic development commission. A bunch of towns are doing rezoning now. Simsbury just did theirs, Guilford just did theirs, Madison is about to do theirs. You know, again, you know your zoning ordinance and whether, you know, that needs to be modified or not, but they're doing it to allow for denser, smaller lots, much denser development in certain places in town. Like I said, townwide meetings, they're doing that, you know, Madison, Guilford, Hamden, a bunch of towns are doing that. There is the issue of repurposing properties, and you may have those here. I know my town, I live in West Hartford, they have, in the last 3 years, turned a monastery, a synagogue, an old hotel into housing. Sometimes the structure does not lend itself to repurposing into housing, but other times it does. If it does, it's kind of a good thing because the density is already there, the building's already there, the structure's already there, and so people don't freak out about it because they've looked at it already. I've talked to a bunch of towns that have these old 6 to 8 store strip malls that many created in the 50s and 60s, and time has passed them by, and you've probably seen them, if not in your town and others, where 3 of the 6 stores are empty, and towns are beginning to look at that opportunity and talking to the property owner and say, when the leases are up on the other 3 stores, how about if we rezone this for multifamily housing? And sometimes that's a good idea because they are typically on commercial strips or bus lines, and they don't impact the neighborhood. So that's another thing that towns are thinking about. The last thing that's kind of interesting is towns are proactively going out to find developers. They're not waiting. I have gotten to know a bunch of developers who I think are very good. They're mixed income for-profit developers, but what they do is continue to hold on to their developments as assets. That, to me, is a smart thing for towns to look for, because that developer, if he continues to hold it as an asset, is A, not going to cut corners when he builds it originally, and is going to continue to maintain it inside and out afterward, and not let it go to seed. So towns are doing that. I was just in Berlin. They have a bunch of developments and have added that housing by developers who continue to hold it as assets. Bottom line, and like I said, I'm happy to answer questions if you have them, is the demand for multifamily housing is not going to go away. They tell me I'm 73. They tell me I'm going to live till 90. You know, we have a lot of baby boom generation people who are going to live a long time and are going to need multifamily housing. Their millennial children want it because, like I said, either college debt or their lifestyle does not lend itself to owning a single-family home. And a lot of towns don't have it. One quick statistic, 2/3 of the towns in Connecticut built 40% of their housing or more after 1970. Why? Because 1970 you began to see the wave of baby boomers reach childbearing and marrying and home buying years. So towns typically have hugely skewed housing stock to single family. 2/3 of the towns have at least 70% single family homes, and many are 80. You know, Guilford, Madison, they're not like up at around 90. So the point is that you have the baby boom generation, the second largest wave of population, and the millennial generation, the largest, all wanting the same type of multifamily home, and most towns don't have it. So most towns are thinking about how do we provide it, where do we provide it, and how do we do it without acrimony. And like I said, they are inviting in residents to offer their thoughts. They're inviting in developers to do a good job. And they're mostly, and most important, looking for the right locations where people will not be upset about it. But as I told the people in Guilford the other day, you're going to get the housing one way or another, because developers will try to use the 830G statute if zoning commissions don't provide them the density they use. It's the only way they can get the density that they need to profitably build the housing. So towns can either decide where they want it, or some developer might come in and try to force it down your throat where you don't want it. And that's what towns are dealing with. I was just in Glastonbury. I provide some volunteer work for them, and they have 5 pending 830G proposals there. Why? Because like North Branford, it's a wonderful town. It's beautiful. They got good schools. They have services, and developers who can make some money by building mixed income housing there. So that's essentially where we are. The last thing I won't go through, but I left for you, is the update that the Partnership for Strong Communities did on where things stand in the legislature. I can't tell you that it gives you a great deal of information, because a lot is still up in the air. Like I said, my best guess is the legislature will try to do something to promote housing creation. I would like to think that it's going to be incentive-based rather than mandate. There is also movement on just cause eviction. There's a huge issue about rental housing and that pits landlords' rights, property rights against tenants who feel like, they can't, there's not a shortage of apartments if they get evicted for no reason other than the guy wants to raise rents. Where are they gonna live? So, both sides have reasonable points of view, and the legislature's gonna have to figure that one out. So those are basically the two issues, but we'll try to send to Dave updates on that when we have them down the road. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and I do really appreciate you guys listening to us. It's a huge issue, and
Bless
towns
you.
are having to deal with it.
Thank you.
Anyone have any questions for Dave? Dave, it must be difficult for towns to get on board with housing from your perspective. I know it's very difficult in this town to have any conversation
Yeah.
to change anything in town. It's
But
very
I,
difficult to convince people to even do something simple beyond
Sure.
housing. So, I've lived here for 30 years like most people have, like you'd said. And there's a need for housing. Why does it need to come to North Branford? Right? I mean, my understanding is in 2021, when we passed the legislature passed the bill to mandate that every town in Connecticut, correct me if I'm wrong, has to have a minimum affordable housing at 10%.
Yeah, I would explain it a little differently.
Okay, please do.
It's called the 8-30G law.
Okay.
It was actually originally passed, it was amended in 2021. It was originally passed in 1990. It's about 35 years old. It essentially says that if less than 10% of a town's housing stock is guaranteed to remain affordable, either by deed restriction or some other restriction, condition of the developer getting subsidized financing. If less than 10% is income restricted, a developer can buy a property, and as long as he agrees to make at least 30% of the units income restricted, he can override the local zoning. And the burden of proof is on the town to show that this would threaten public health or safety. That's a very big burden. Towns are usually unable to show that, and so the developers usually win in court. Needless to say, a lot of towns dislike that provision of state law. It was put in by the legislature when we had a housing crisis in the late 80s, because there was no place for a lot of workers like we talked about who do important jobs but don't make enough money to afford the current housing stock. And I would say it's created a bunch of units, both income restricted, 30% of the units are income restricted, and the other 70% are modest market rate units. So that's the deal. So it's not that they require you to have 10%, but they are saying if you don't have 10%, the developer can come in and override your local zoning. That's what I meant at the end when I said the demand for multifamily housing is so great now, and the supply of it is so slim that towns are going to continue to see 830G proposals unless they proactively figure out where can we put higher density housing, multifamily housing in places that we decide we want. Because otherwise developers will buy properties where you may not want that housing, and they're likely to win. They win about 2/3 of the cases that go to court, but they also win the cases that don't go to court, that get settled before. So, you know, the issue is that in 1970, when, you know, a developer would walk in here and see you guys and say, I just bought a 40-acre cornfield and I'd like to put up 40 4-bedroom colonials on 1-acre lots, and you said, fine. And he built them in 18 months, and he sold them in 6 months, and everybody was happy. And that worked great from about 1970 to 2010, when people like me started retiring, or trying to retire. And since 2010, that's really begun to change, because well, baby boomers my age wanted to downsize and want that multifamily unit, and children, my children's age, millennials, have wanted a multifamily unit, and there's huge demand for it, and there's not enough of it, and so that's why you're going to continue to see this demand here.
Can I ask, are there any provisions for like rural towns like this where there's, at some point, there's capacity restrictions with septic
Sure.
systems? You know, we don't have sewers, a lot of sewers, so you can't put a 5-story, you know,
Right.
120 unit in a lot of places in town.
Yeah,
Is
I
there
mean, I'll be
any, is
frank
there any
with you.
allowance out of that 10%, yeah?
Yeah,
Or is it just 10?
I mean,
everywhere?
not having sewers or provision of water does deter
Water.
developers,
Yeah.
because that's an added cost. I mean, basically, it's always materials, labor, land, right?
Yeah.
I'm told by a developer, I know, I ran into him in the supermarket the other day, his insurance costs are also up 22% in the last year. So that's another huge cost. But then, if they have to put in, you know, a wastewater system,
Yeah.
that adds to the cost too. So, in towns, I think, I don't wanna, I can't name names, but I'm sure that there's some towns that say, well, let's make sure we don't add sewers
Oh,
or provide water,
yeah.
and that may keep developers of multifamily
Yeah.
housing out. The sewer, I know in Orange, they had a parcel, they built 48 beautiful units of multifamily housing there, but the issue came down to sewer hookup fees. And like a lot of towns that have not had a lot of multifamily housing, the Water Pollution Control Authority set a sewer hookup fee for single-family homes, because that's what they had in town. And now you had a multifamily developer come in, and they wanted to charge the same amount per unit in multifamily development
Yeah.
as they were charging for single-family homes.
Sure.
Well, that was gonna eat up the whole contingency fee for that developer. She might not have been able to do the deal,
Mhm.
but she was able to do it.
Yeah.
But the town did not change the fee.
Mhm.
And, you know, I think the reason why the town didn't change the fee is they didn't want to set a precedent for more multifamily developers to come in at a
Yeah.
lower fee. So that's
It's also,
the issue.
it's also
Yeah.
capacity, like
Yeah.
we sent it to Branford. If they don't have capacity for us, you can't say, well, we have this housing thing, we're gonna be sending it to you anyway. Right?
I mean, the technology has improved, so depending on the parcel, you know, and is the soil sandy, is it clay,
Yeah,
is it
that too.
ledge, which way the wastewater goes, sometimes you can put density in a
Mhm.
place and do it cost effectively so the developer can do it. I mean, that's the issue in towns, that the towns have to figure out where they want it, which is to say, where do the town residents want it or don't want it leased.
Yeah.
And then, you know, try to find the right places to do it. Why will towns do it? Because they need places
Mhm.
for people. Like I said, you know,
Sure.
empty, I lived in my town for 35 years. I wanna stay in my town.
Mhm.
That's where all my friends are
Yeah.
and, you know, family. They wanna do it because they wanna attract, you know, young families to town.
Mhm.
You know, they're the ones who volunteer to coach the Little League team and,
Yep.
you know, the boys, you know, run the Boy Scout troop. a lot of people would like to see their kids not just on Christmas and Easter, they'd like to see them every Sunday for dinner. They'd like their kids to be able to return to the town they grew up in. So there are a lot of reasons to do it. I was talking to the mayor of Wallingford the other day, and, not the other day, last month, and we were talking about developing property. You know, when 95% of the municipal revenue comes from the property tax, it makes sense to develop the property if you can, and put property that is highly valued, and multifamily housing right now is highly valued, on the grand list. But you really want to hear from the residents in town, because they're the ones who, you know, think at least they're affected by it. They're not as affected as they think sometimes, but it's really good to hear from them first. And that's why towns are having town meetings and community conversations. I facilitated a bunch of town meetings, and they're really good. You know, my feeling, and again, you probably as experienced as I am on that, you know, a lot of people don't want to listen to anyone else until they feel like they've first been heard. People have to have a chance to say their piece. And like I said, it's not irrational for them to worry about how the town's going to change. They need to, you know, offer their thoughts about it. So, like I said, I'm not saying your zoning commission should run a town meeting, that, you know, towns do their business the other way, and, you know, their own way. But those town meetings have been helpful in a bunch of towns. And the community conversations you're having in town are good. And it's really good to hear from the residents about housing, because they care about it. I don't know if you noticed on the housing basic sheet here, housing is the largest part of any budget. Household budget, 32%. It's a lot. And, you know, people spend a lot of money on it, and they want value for it, and it's really basic to the community. You gotta have housing. It's the last thing I tell people in meetings is think about it. How many different types of homes you've lived in over the course of your life. You know, you live in your parents' house, and then you go to college, and you get out of college, and you share an apartment with, you know, 4 other guys until you get tired of their empty beer cans and, you know, dirty underwear around the place. And so you get your own place, or you go share it with someone else. And then you meet someone, and you move into an apartment with that person. And then maybe you get married and you buy a house, and then maybe you buy a bigger house, and then you get old and you downsize, and then maybe you need some assisted living. I mean, we all live at different stages of our lives in a lot of different kinds of places. So healthy communities like this have people at all those different stages of their lives. And so, you know, we used to say at the Partnership for Strong Communities, that strong communities need all kinds of people, and all kinds of people need all kinds of housing. So, you know, you guys are the expert, and you, I'm sure, have looked at the range of housing opportunities you have in town. And if you think you don't have enough of certain types, you have to figure out, can we add those? And where can we add those? And can we do it proactively and invite in developers to give us their ideas? You know, you have your zoning map, you have a really good planner in Dave, and you can figure out, you know, where can we put this? It's a very hard job. Most towns do not have experience proactively creating housing. They haven't stopped. Some towns have designated a housing officer. Sometimes it's the planner, sometimes it's the town manager, sometimes it's the community or economic development director. But to create housing proactively, you probably have to have somebody in town who gets up every day and is thinking about, okay, what do we got? What do we need? Can we find places for it? So, you know, it's a good way to think about it. Like I said, you know, I've probably been before more zoning commissions than anybody in the state. And I'm not trying to flatter you guys, but I admire zoning commissioners, because you agree for no pay at all to come to 1 or 2 meetings a month and stay sometimes till after midnight to approve stuff, and then you get accosted and annihilated at the Stop and Shop on Saturday, and people wag their fingers and say, why'd you approve that? And, you know, if you have guts, which I'm sure you do, that doesn't deter you for the next time. But I have to say, you know, sometimes zoning commissioners do get risk averse. They don't like getting accosted, you know, and annihilated. So, you know, so it's a really hard job, and I admire it. And like I say, you know, you're not getting paid, you know anything to do it, you're public servants. So it's hard, and it's a hard issue to talk about, and like I told Dave, you know, we're here to help, if we can. We will tell you what to do, but like I said, we'll tell you what other towns do.
Anyone else have any questions for Dave? Ron?
Just looking at our number here, 2% is where we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2.17.
2.17.
Yeah.
All right.
Been
So,
that way for a
And
while.
even we've seen a plethora of accessory dwelling units recently being applied for or being found by the building inspector, or people splitting up their house to accommodate their downsizing needs and their income needs. And it's been sort of a pretty good thing recently that we've been adding, but it doesn't do anything to our affordable housing number because they're not deed restricted or anything else, but I think it's a plus.
Why doesn't that affect the affordable housing number? It should very much affect it if you're adding a number of units of.
Right, because the 830G, they need to be deed restricted.
ADUs have to be deed restricted for 10 years, and then they can affect that number, then they can be
Deed
counted.
restricted, meaning what?
Meaning
Affordable?
that they have to be affordable for people at 80% of median income or 60% of median income.
That needs to be put in the
That number
land.
changes every year, right? I mean, or-
Well, yeah, but it just reflects that number, and it needs to be updated every year to make sure that they're still required, but it needs to be put on the,
Impossible to meet. It really is. It's just, you know, for any town, it's, you know, affordable housing.
there
We have
is
apartments
some,
that were built as affordable housing, and now they're not affordable anymore. You know, it's, you know,
Can-
what do
can
you
you-
do? You know, little tiny houses or something? It just
Well,
doesn't.
that's
Can
the
you-
point, that's why you want to you have to deed restrict them, because the market will, you know, raise the price. When you guys have been to West Hartford, I'm sure you've seen Blueback Square, when that was built,
Mhm.
the council said, well, the rents on those apartments are only about $1,100 a month, so they're affordable to a lot of people, right? And took about 3 weeks for the rents to rise way out of reach of a lot of people. So, you know, the market will knock up the price, like we said. You know, rental housing rose 22% from 2019 to 2023, and it's gone up since then, because if the demand outstrips supply, then price
Can
will
you,
go up.
what, the percent, how is that calculated? Is
What?
it the average, to be considered affordable? Is it the average housing for that community? So in North
There
Branford, what's
are,
considered
I think-
affordable housing in North Branford? Is it average housing cost, percentage of our average housing cost? So it varies.
for the region that we're in, which is the Meriden.
So it's a regional
Yeah.
average housing cost, not
Correct.
North Branford. Got it.
Yeah, there are 8 metropolitan statistical areas in Connecticut, and you're in the
Meriden.
Haven Milford one, I think.
We're the Meriden
Oh, the
one.
Meriden.
So Meriden
So it's 80% of the
of,
income, and then there's a rental number that's associated with that 80%, which typically is, it's very similar to a market rate in North Branford. The rents for like a two-family house would be $2,000 a month, roughly.
Well, if you look at this,
so it's based on the average income for the eight towns within the Meriden district for us.
Correct.
That's where we're based on. Got it.
and
Meriden,
so the way it works would
Wallingford.
be, let's say somebody was making, let's say $60,000 a year. Okay, divided by 12 months is $5,000 a month. That person can't spend more than 30% of their
Yeah.
income on housing, so the rent would have to be 30% of $5,000 or $1,500 a month, and that's let's say that $60,000 was 80% of area median income. So the developer creating units for people at 80% of median income could
I
never
understand,
have
yeah.
more than $1,500 a month.
But it's based on the average for
Right.
that 8 towns within that Meriden district.
Correct.
Or part of Meriden, okay. Got it, thank you.
And I do have one question, if I might. And how do they gather the data? Census,
You
through
mean
the
income
census?
data and rental data? HUD gets that data and they publish it.
So
For
for
the-
instance, they would go to the apartments at Marshfield and they would get the data of all the renters and they'd compare that to what they're paying?
No,
Well, they're deed restricted. So every time that a house is deed restricted, part of the process is to tell HUD that it's on the list. And you also get the,
You mean just the community itself? How do you get the
Yeah.
data?
with the
Like-
other
Determine
mortgages,
the average
the
income
farming
you're
Of
mortgages,
rental
the,
properties?
or the average cost of
HUD
rental?
mortgage.
Well, the average
Mortgages.
income of renters.
Yeah, that- so
Compared
that's-
to the rent they're paying.
Yeah. I think
Well,
the
let's say-
question's a little different, if you heard the question.
I mean, what happens is that, let's say a developer comes to X town in the New Haven region. And that town, like a lot of towns, has what's called an inclusionary zoning ordinance, which would say that a developer has to make 10 or 12 or 15, or whatever the town says, % of the units income restricted at a certain income level. In other words, deed restrict that. So let's say it's 20%. So a guy wants to put up 100 units in X town, has to make 20% of those units, let's say, deed restricted at 80% of the area median income. So that means, let's say that in that statistical area, in X town, 80% of the area median income is, to use our figure, for $60,000. So that guy can't charge that person more than $1,500 a month for that unit. Let's say, to this gentleman's point, that 80% of median income in that area goes up, doubles in 5 years to $120,000. Well, now he can charge double what he was charging. Instead of $1,500 a month, he can charge $3,000 a month. Okay, so it's going to be 30% of the person's monthly income. It has to remain that way. Typically, deed restricted units remain deed restricted for 30 or 40 years.
Oh, that's a percentage, that's not, you're paying $1,000 a month, and you have to hold that for 20 years. It goes up with
Yeah,
inflation.
you pay 30% of your income, whatever the area median income at that income level is. So it can go up.
Yeah, okay.
How is I think the question was, I don't want to speak for Mary. How is the median income determined? You said HUD, but I think you
Well,
said.
HUD and the Census Bureau,
How did,
well,
Where
through
do
the
they get it
census,
from?
they
Just-
know what the median income is in that
How do they
metropolitan
know that?
statistical area.
from the census.
From the census.
And I do get a list every year of the number of units that have been dropped off or been added based on the time frame. So I do have a chance as the planner to go back to the state and say, no, that number's wrong. It should be higher. And there is also some legislation pending right now to add more naturally occurring affordable housing. So mobile home parks would get counted as naturally occurring affordable housing under one bill that's in the legislature right now,
Which is not going to pass.
which is not going to pass.
I mean,
but it's-
to be honest with you, I think naturally occurring affordable housing is, the question I would ask, and it's not like I'm begging the question, is affordable for whom? It may be affordable for someone at a certain income level, but not for someone else. So, you know, it's like when I was in Woodbridge a few months ago, we were talking about naturally occurring affordable housing, saying, well, we have some condos that are selling for $275,000. Those are affordable. And I thought, yeah, for some people, but not for other people. Not for the guy at Starbucks who's making your latte. He can't buy that. So, you know, again, it depends on people's perspective what they think is naturally affordable. I mean, I think there's an argument that if you have a mobile home park where the rents are in the hundreds of dollars and not over $1,000, yeah, that's going to be affordable to a lot of people. But as we've seen in a lot of places, a lot of lower cost housing units wind up going up in value when there's not a lot of supply, and a lot of people are chasing that supply. So Dave is really good at, he knows a lot about this, and I'm sure he can fill in questions you have going forward, but we're happy to help you with any other questions you have, and we'll research it for you and come again. You seem like very nice people. We'd be happy to come back.
Thanks, Dave. Anybody else before we
No,
let Dave go?
thank you.
Thanks, Dave, for the presentation.
Thank you, and you guys have a good night. If it's okay, I'm gonna go home and see my wife.
Yeah.
We do this. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Sure, if he wants to, absolutely.
So I know this isn't a public hearing, but I see you, Scott. Did you want to add anything to the conversation?
No, I'm just curious, I go to these meetings, his son is running meetings, what do they call those?
I still don't know what it's called. It's Common Grounds Connecting.
But it's getting everybody together, it's funny.
Oh, yeah.
A friend of mine, daughter's was there, and she like laid into me one time because, you know, oh, you just designed big houses, everybody should be affordable, you know, we just got into this thing. And after a few of these meetings, it's interesting to see her side and my side, we both become quite friendly after that, talking about how, you know, the need to try to create some sort of affordable housing. Like I said, in our zoning regs need to be addressed and something needs to be done. But, you know, I moved to this town because it reminded me, I grew up in Orange, but I went to school in Ohio.
Scott, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
Why don't you come to the mic? I think this is an intriguing conversation. I think everyone should be able to hear it in the audience, or not here, but just want to, you can sit down too.
Yeah, I will.
Just your name and address, please.
Scott Small, 285 Knott Shore Road. And and so the house, you know, in moving here, I really appreciated the, you know, it reminded me of Ohio with all the farmland and everything else. And, you know, through the years, 30 years I've lived here, I thought it was pretty interesting that they ended up, on 22, is it still there? I'm not sure, but the zoning, you know, maintained that you had to have the green front along the way. You could develop behind area, but they were going to keep the green belt, if you will, up the road. That was before Kerry, so I thought that was approved. I don't know if it's still there or not, to be honest with you. But, you know, anyways, regardless, the development has not changed up there, and it's still nice to drive up the road and see the farmlands and all that stuff. And you know, I don't know the answer, and that's like surprising these things. Oh, you have to have so many affordable units, and they keep talking about rent, but to me, rent is never affordable. Like I said, I lived in Ohio, I came back, and so, oh, you want to rent, you know, pardon my term, this was way back in the 70s, and I was paying $150 a month in Ohio, and I come back to Connecticut, it's $350. So, oh, geez, for that, I can afford a house, and sure enough, I did. And, you know, so you buy a house, and now my $350 a month is paying for something, as opposed to waiting 5 years, my $350 a month turns into $550 a month, which turns into $750, you know, it just goes on and on and on, and you can't afford a house. So I don't think rentals are the answer. You know, I liked, what's his name's project, it was gonna be up by, Firelight. You know, somebody came to, our economic development meeting one night, and said, oh, we got a proposal up there, and they had 10 houses in a circle, and it was, I went, what is this? oh, we, you know, and luckily wetlands, you know, said, you know, it's gonna be, unable to afford it. And then, what's his name? It's,
Is it Belafonte?
yeah, Belafonte comes back, and he's got 150 units up there. And it's a beautiful building, and it kind of fits next to it, you know. I mean, you can't take that and put that anywhere in town, but it fit up there. And then, you know, and somewhere along the line, he can make some affordable units in there. And, you know, and I know he showed you guys the projects he's done and all that, and now that's a solution, you know. Now you've got people coming into town, it kind of limits the people you want to go to school, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, we're building this brand new high school. It's bigger than what we had before, and our population of the high school is much lower. So what's the point? Who cares, you know, let the kids go to school, you know, we've got capacity to handle that. So, I mean, I wish I had an answer, I really don't. But, you know, I like our town, I like the fact that we're very slow growing. I've been looking at Guilford and Madison. Guilford just amazes me that they have 0 sewers anywhere. There's no sewers in all of Guilford. But yet, you go downtown, there's 3, 4-story buildings, there's apartments over the top of them. There's out by where you go out at the end of Church Street, or not Church Street, but you know, you go downtown, you go out there, they put up these apartment buildings that are huge down at the train station. As a matter of fact, I was working on that guy's project. I designed him on a series of 15 units, and he ended up not doing the project and sold it. And there's freaking high-rise there. It's, you know, there are solutions out there, with or without septic.
Right.
So, and, you know, it takes a creative zoning process, and, you know, I agree. I mean, we can't just go out in the middle of 22 somewhere and say, hey, let's put up a 6-story building. You know, who's gonna want that, other than the developer? But, so I don't know the answer. I just, you know, I sympathize with everybody's, you know, situations, but apartments and rentals, I don't see it be, you know, especially they call, oh, you're 10% affordable housing. It changes month to month what's affordable, and, you know, I don't know. I wish I had a better response, better solution, I should say. But, and the in-law apartments, I mean, you know, you're talking about, I think that's a good thing for people to do, is to have on their house, and we have done a few of them, and, you know, and again, you gotta have to do them carefully, because you don't want a bunch of little duplexes going in, but, you know, with most houses in Connecticut and stuff, there's plenty of ways to add on, and you wouldn't know there's 2 families in there. So, but to not count those as affordable housing, that makes no sense. So I don't understand that subsidy part or whatever he was talking about, but, you know, there are solutions out there. I just, you know, maybe just have to hack away at it and avoid getting these 830G developments. I know there was one that was supposed to go up in Northford that somehow it got, I wouldn't say squashed, but not built or not accepted. But, you know, because there was a really nice area, and so it's, well, I'm going to stick 3 little houses in here. And then actually over by Rose's, there's a place that had 3 little, I think you guys approved it, and I looked at it, and even talking to Albus. That's a great solution. They took 3 little buildings that were on the site. Well, let's put 3 little apartments in there. Nothing wrong with that. So,
You're right, Scott.
Take some creative zoning. So.
Right. It doesn't get us to the 10% at all. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
and it changes, as you said, Dave, it changes. It's only on there for a certain period of time anyway,
But
right?
they don't-
Right, and every time you build an affordable house, you're diluting the whole percentage. So every time you build an affordable house, you're, I mean, you know, a non-affordable house, you're adding to the denominator.
Right.
Percentage goes down, correct?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's a no-win situation.
Was Fowler Road was Fowler Road, was any of that affordable?
I don't believe any of that was affordable, but it hasn't been in front of us,
Yeah, the
so.
first go-around was like 270 units, and then there was this overlay thing that I thought was more, like there were 30 units leading into that with an overlay. I thought those were more of the affordable.
Oh, where was that? Cherry Hills?
Yeah,
Yeah. But anyway,
Yeah,
that's
they-
still not,
they
still
did
not,
it.
that's
Yeah.
still not
They-
getting
They
it.
had the big apartment building too, which, you
Yeah.
know, again, whether those are
Yeah.
considered an affordable capacity of it or
Yeah.
not, I don't know.
Yeah.
But, yeah, like Marshfield and the other ones there, I mean, there are, I guess, quote unquote, affordable units. in
Well,
town, but
and
but
to-
but it just, like I said, it just changes year to year.
Mm.
All of a sudden, they're not affordable. I mean, people are talking about affordable housing now being 1,500 to 2,000 or even more than 2,000 a month, and I look at it, I'm like, I can't afford it. I mean,
Yeah.
my mortgage is almost paid, and it was never near 2,000.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford 2,000. I
Yeah.
can't afford 2,000 a month now for housing, you know, so.
And Scott, what's missing from the equation is, that's great, let's build affordable apartments, but there's no conversation moving beyond that.
Yeah,
You rented, I rented, then we moved to a single-family home to have a family. There's no conversation for those individuals, so we're always gonna be short housing?
yeah.
Once you
no,
build all
I
these
know,
apartments and you
yeah,
fill them,
yeah.
at some point in time, their family grows to go where?
Right, right.
There's none of that conversation other than get the developer to build something.
Yeah, you can see what happens, and, well,
Right.
and again, you know, in a zoning point of view, I think, you know, the other thing is, you know, you talk about affordable housing, and so the developer considers affordable is it's inexpensive to build, and what you have to avoid is building cheap housing, because that helps nobody. You know, you have these pieces of crap that are developed, and they're only gonna go down in value and devalue people around there, so it's, you know, it's, you know,
Exactly.
you know, you have to still do quality housing, and the price of construction materials anymore, I'm doing simple additions for people now, and they're $250,000 for
Yeah.
little additions. You know,
You
nothing
need
I
to
can-
find
nothing
affordable,
I can change about it.
you need to find affordable materials
That's-
for
yeah,
affordable housing.
Yeah, yeah. Or again, I don't know if there's, say there's a development and you put in a little pot of these little tiny houses, I don't know if I would like that, or anybody else would like it, or neighbors would like it, but, it's an interesting thought. It's, kind of sounds like, California, I think they do a lot of that out there.
Right, exactly.
Seems to work, but it ends up being a hippie commune, so.
Scott, thank you for
And-
stepping up and having a
And-
conversation, appreciate it.
While he's still there, talking about affordable dwelling units, we allow them attached to a primary dwelling unit, but we don't allow them in a separate unit. So you can't put an addition over your detached garage and allow grandma to live in it.
Right.
I mean, that's
Yeah,
something
the
that,
house.
what?
It has to be part of that house.
Correct.
Yeah.
And a lot of towns have changed that over the last few years.
So allow it to grandma's over the garage in there.
Yeah,
That's it. Okay.
and whether you guys want to,
Or to convert the garage.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, or convert the whole garage into a
Right, so the garage
house.
disappears and it becomes another house, yeah. Yes, those are good possibilities, but again, you can do that in one of two ways. It can still look like an old garage and nobody would ever know anybody lived there, or you can, it's just, oh, look, they put a little house next to their other house, It's
Right,
like a
or you-
monopoly house
Or you
something.
have an existing subdivision where everybody's moving in, assuming that it's going to be single-family houses. And all of a sudden, everybody has a accessory dwelling unit, and now you have twice the traffic and
Yeah.
twice the amount of cars, and it's not what you signed up for when you
Yeah.
were moving in. I mean,
And again, the septic has a lot to do with that, the septic capacity and all that, so.
we're not changing the bedrooms or anything, so you're not going to have to go to health.
Well, if you have a two-bedroom house and you're making a two-bedroom apartment, you're changing the count on the bedrooms. Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
That would affect our zoning too, because if I'm on a 1 acre lot and I put grandma's apartment on that lot, now that's 2 half-acre lots.
Well, it's just a new regulation.
Yeah.
Well, it's a density thing, you're keeping the same lot, you're not splitting the lot.
Yeah.
So you have the same lot, but, Yeah,
You have two
density,
dwellings
yeah.
on one lot.
Correct. But you're gonna limit the size of that second structure to 800 square feet. So it's not two full-size houses. It's just something you should think about.
Yeah, it's be interesting to see how a lot of these towns address these things, and, you know, like I said, different places have different zoning laws, and, some seem to work well, and, like I said, the places in Guilford, they seem to be doing a fine job without septic systems, which always kind
Yeah.
of amazed me. You drive down Route 1, how are there no septics here? Apartment after apartment after apartment, building, they're everywhere. No, we don't have, there's no sewers here. So, it can be done.
So that's shellfish beds are always closed.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, appreciate you.
Good,
Yeah,
yeah.
appreciate it.
It's an interesting dilemma, and that group that his son is running is interesting, I think. Are they planning on some public,
That's the end goal.
the end goal, some public input or whatever, I don't know. So, and it's good, get people from all walks of life, people come in. And, oh, I think we should have this, and this, and I mean, just different ends of the spectrum all coming together and trying to work out stuff, so. And hopefully it'll all work out somehow.
It always does, Scott.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, we appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks,
My
Scott.
pleasure, thanks.
Okay. So let's move on, if we got some time, talk about a little bit of Schedule A. Thanks for providing the updated version, Dave.
So I think this version, all the blue type is being eliminated,
Oh, eliminated, good to get that.
and the green type is addition. And I think all the original copy is in here.
All right, point out green to me. or green. I'm colorblind.
We're gonna go
I can
to-
see blue.
How about B3, Dave, Bill?
B3,
There's natural preserves,
B3,
nature preserve, not natural, nature preserves.
right here. Oh, here, yeah.
So B3 is green,
There's blue underneath.
and where's the next one? B31 is eliminated, yeah.
That's blue.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, let's see
All right,
blue.
I got it. I'll
There's
get
not-
it
There's
through.
not much, Bill.
There seems to be a lot more blue, right?
Yeah.
a lot more
Okay.
blue.
Yeah, I can see the blue.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I can tell it's a different font.
I think maybe what we could do is look at the, at this,
Yeah, I saw that, that's good, thank you.
Kind of a
Good summary, yeah, good
Yeah.
summary, yeah.
The table of uses, 524.
so I think we, I just, the farm, winery, brewery, farm outdoor events, again, those were like shoehorned in for specific people in specific locations, and that's fine. We can just leave it that way.
Okay.
The commercial,
There were, I mean, specific, yeah, zoning amendment, right, text amendments?
yeah, and they
Forward,
were,
yeah.
they were sort of for specific parcels,
yeah,
and that's
yeah.
why it's in that zone and
Mhm.
not allowed in other zones. I think when we start looking more at the permitted uses
Yeah.
and what's special permit and what's site plan, that we can narrow that down at
Yeah.
that point.
Okay, that's a good way of looking at it.
Again, the commercial kennels was that same sort of thing. Accessory dwelling units, we just talked about that. I did add museums. I think appliance stores are actually covered just by our retail. We don't have any sort of limiting factor to size of store, so a mega store would be allowed.
Right.
Some towns like to limit their stores to no more than 40,000 square feet or 60,000 square feet, but we've never done that. We took care of the golf courses, driving range, flea markets. Flea markets are allowed in the industrial zone, but the only ones that we really have here are in a residential zone.
So they're currently allowed in industrial zones?
Right. For whatever that's worth. The,
So as a residential homeowner, you can't have, in principle, can't have a flea market on a
yeah,
Saturday?
actually.
You can,
Well, you can have a tag sale, you
Tag
can't
sale.
have a flea, I mean,
yeah.
technically, it's not allowed.
Okay.
So flea markets are allowed in business zones, but not in industrial zones,
Okay, but not in residential zones either.
not in residential zones.
They're allowed in industrial zones?
No,
No, just
Currently,
business
no.
zones.
Just business.
just business.
Got it,
You
okay.
would think an industrial zone would be a pretty logical place for a flea market.
I think so. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it makes sense to me.
Yep.
At this point in the conversation, yes.
Mhm.
So the restaurant use,
So is this implying that they're not, are they
So-
not allowed in industrial zones currently?
so look at the, under food and hospitality use on page 4. We have C5, restaurants and other food and beverage services establishment that are allowed in B1 and B2 by special permit. And then under that, we have indoor restaurants and other food and beverage service establishments that are allowed in all the business zones and the industrial zones. So what's the difference between a restaurant and an indoor restaurant? And how do you want to limit that? I mean, if it doesn't say indoor restaurant, does that mean it's like an outdoor restaurant?
Yeah.
The place, the place,
Food truck.
the
Or like
place.
serving food outside?
What was that, Chris?
Like serving the food outside? Is that what? Because that doesn't make,
Doesn't make any sense,
No.
does it?
no.
Can you open up a can of worms? It's not really open up a can of worms,
That attracts the chickens.
but, yeah.
Well, I mean, this is the way it is right now.
Yeah, no, I know. I just wondered if, I don't think it's specific in our plan of conservation and development when we looked at trying to, I mean, do we want businesses in industrial? I mean, certain ones, yes, but
We already have a restaurant at industrial. Rose's Orchard.
Bless you.
That's an I2 zone.
Yeah. It's a winery.
Winery, oh, that's right. Farm winery, that's right.
Well, that's because that's where they wanted to have it.
Yeah, no, I know. No, I'm asking this a general question. I'm not saying either way, I'm just recalling something in our plan of conservation and development. But I2, because that is a special zone where you can get, not that a restaurant's not a business, but you can get more of an industrial style business. I guess what I'm saying is, if a restaurant's already allowed in business zones, if you allow them into more zones, is that taking away from potential industrial type businesses in industrial zones? Because they can't go in business zones, right?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
my point, yeah.
We want to have industrial uses in the industrial zone, not a restaurant use that should be in a business zone, right?
I'm not saying I care either way, I'm just throwing it out there, because I thought there was something in our plan of conservation and development at some point talking about that. Maybe it was more to develop the industrial zones for industrial uses,
Right, well, maybe we look at it from, as Chris was saying, from a food truck point of view, that we don't regulate food trucks one way or the other. I mean, I treat them as a restaurant because that's what they are.
Right?
So if they go and sit on a industrial site or a business site, I make sure they have enough parking, they set back, they basically have to meet all the requirements of what a building would be. Because it's a restaurant use,
Yeah.
happens to be
I'm
in a
saying more,
food truck.
say if we just have, say we have 25 industrial zones, parcels in industrial zone, that's 25. And if they can't go in business zones, but if all the businesses can go in industrial zones, we're gonna be,
Diluting the
diluting
industrial
our
concept,
potential for industrial
right.
development if we're converting it all to business, because they can go to each, where an industrial can't. I don't know if we care, and maybe we should look at our plan of conservation and development.
Well, maybe we should just consider eliminating C 5.1 or coming up with a food truck option in its place.
And that's not in your new green items there, Dave? Takeout, fast food restaurants, drive-throughs? You want to add it to that?
Well, I think those are two new categories that
Two
we
new
need to
categories.
address. But those would just sort of follow the C5 in terms of their usage, but they'd probably be special permits as well.
Right, like a food truck,
Yeah,
right? Okay. So your proposal is to eliminate 5.1.
yes.
I agree, yeah.
Agree?
Yeah.
It does seem redundant.
Right. Well, but they're different zones,
Right.
right? So we'd eliminate the industrial use restaurant in an industrial use zone.
That's basically the difference. The
Yeah.
special permit still applies, but just, it's B3 and the I2, I3 would go away.
Right.
Does this affect any current business that we know of, Dave? Then they'll become non-conforming? If we do, if such a business does exist now,
Well, they'd be,
Under this category?
they'd be grandfathered in.
they'd be grandfathered in. Okay. That goes without saying for anything we're eliminating.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we talked briefly about that. We have to do anything we do carefully, which we're doing, but if we do find something that's conflicting, it'll be grandfathered, but overall, we're bringing more things into conformance, right?
Right.
We're improving it. Overall, it'll be much improved.
So I
Even
could,
if we
I could
create-
probably just take that takeout restaurant and drive-through restaurant and just incorporate it into C-5, rather than making a new line, because it's going to be the same locations and permits. It just makes it easier for somebody looking at the schedule to say, oh, yeah, that works.
Yeah, you're increasing the verbiage under C5.
Right.
Because we're not gonna change its usage, it's still gonna be B2, B1, B2.
Right. So we should add a drive-up window regulation. The state has all sorts of regulations about it if we're on a state highway, which in North Branford, 99% of the time will be on a state highway. So they cover it, and theirs is more stringent than ours would be. So, I mean, we probably should have one, but is it necessary? I don't really think so.
Okay.
Does it have to exit or enter from a public highway for the state to be involved?
Yeah,
Like TD Bank just goes into the big Y, then it's the big Y exit and entrance. I actually don't even know if they have a drive-through there. I've never used that bank.
Yeah.
I assume they
Well,
do. Do
it's-
they have a bank? Yeah, they have a drive-through.
It's like the Guilford Savings Bank up in Branford.
Yeah.
It's right on 22.
Right.
Entrance to the drive.
that's all on Mansfield.
But that goes on to Mansfield?
Oh, they moved it to the side. No, that's the ATM. The drive-through is on, next to
Right.
Northford Center.
I guess my point is, I was wondering if it was about the queuing and stuff.
It is
Where,
all
like,
about the
TD
queuing.
Bank is isolated from Route 80 because the
Right.
queuing occurs on the Big Y property and exits and entrances are onto the Big Y entrance. So I don't know if that would be like not.
Well,
I'm just
even
I'm just curious now.
the
is what I'm just asking
the
the question.
Starbucks,
Yeah,
the new Starbucks, the state weighed in even after we moved the access way
yeah.
where we moved it. But that's still the state right of
Yeah,
way, even
yeah,
though it's
for
not
sure.
coming straight out on Branford
Got it.
Road, it's still all on state property.
Yeah.
And they had like 14 cars and,
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy enough that we can just copy the state regulation
Yeah,
and
yeah.
put it in.
I mean, Dave, we have C2, which also has banks and other financial institutions. We're specifically speaking of that, but also restaurants have a drive-through, so maybe it makes sense to have one separate for a drive-through, not only a restaurant, but anyone that has a drive-through.
I think we can just have drive-through in the zoning regulations as a text amendment,
Okay.
Yeah.
rather than in the schedule.
Yeah, that's what you were trying to do with other things like this, right?
Right.
Is there, instead of embedding to each different use, just have an overall one that you can point to, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a good example.
I'm not too worried about the commercial recreational facilities. We don't have a whole lot of I3 zones, and we really don't have a whole lot of B3 zones.
True.
There are 2 parcels in the B3 zone.
We were gonna think about combining those, I think, towards the end of our conversation.
Yeah, I think when we get to the end of this, we can eliminate that. The B3 zone is located at Aces on Old
Ah.
Post Road, is B3, and there's a lot on Mansfield going towards the apartments over the bridge, the Farm River Bridge,
Really?
to the left. That's the other B3 parcel.
Okay.
Talk about spot zoning.
Yeah.
Spot zoning in like reverse. Let's create our own district for 2 lots.
I think, Dave, the other B3 was where Starbucks is, but before that, before the highway changed,
Right.
the state right away went to the left of Starbucks. So that little triangle piece was.
That was a B3?
That was B3.
That's right, I forgot about that.
Way back
Yeah,
when.
wow.
So we did the repair garages, automotive. And we basically changed it to C10 that would allow for repair. In C10.1, that would allow for a gas station and a convenience store. And that's basically it.
We made 4 into 2.
Yeah.
Looks like warehouses next, Dave. Looks like we took care of that.
Yeah, and I think we left the, we were gonna take out that 13.1, but I think we left it back in as a smaller one that would be allowed in the B1 zone.
Yep.
And I think we were gonna get rid of 14 and leave 14.1 because they were sort of redundant and the same sort of thing. The 14.1 had that when accessory to any other use in the zone, which like allows you to do pretty much whatever you want. If you have a use that's allowable, then you could have a freight and trucking business accessory to it.
That's when it was 55 feet to 500 feet, right?
Yep. And I think we've sort of cleaned up the left-hand side, and again, we should probably look at the right-hand side. And I'd like to go through that with the Economic Development Commission and get their feedback in terms of how onerous they think special permits are
Okay.
vis-à-vis site plan approval. I mean, we'd like special permit when it's a restaurant and it may have too much parking, or it may have not enough parking, that it's worth a special permit. And we can talk about that and get their feedback.
Okay. Did you want to finish the rest of this list?
What, yeah,
Contractors, yards in I3 zone.
so the contractors, after I was thinking about that, the I3 zone is basically really large lots. The minimum lot size is like 200,000 square feet or something. You don't really want a contractor's yard in a big lot, just because, like, you were saying before,
Yeah.
Bill, that you want to
Yeah.
fill it with
Mhm.
something that would
Yeah.
be,
Work-
generate more
Mhm.
business, so,
Right. Instead of campers.
right.
Yes.
Okay, scratch that one. Research labs, C16. We took 16.1, combined it with 16, I believe. I think that was the thought.
Well, I think we talked about this at the last meeting, that this would allow for manufacturing when it's accessory to another permitted use. So if you have, what was the example, the pistol store. He's selling retail guns and ammunition, but he also fixes guns and then resells them. So he's actually doing some manufacturing and hand assembly in the back of the store to get the stuff ready to sell at retail. He's not just buying it and packaging it, putting it on the shelf and selling it. He's adding some value to it as accessory to the retail.
So keep them divided, industrial.
I would leave him alone, yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, I can think of other examples where you may have a card shop and you do a little bit of printing or cutting the paper to sell. I mean, a little bit of that would be a good thing.
Okay. I'm all right with that. So leave 16s alone, right?
Yep.
Fair enough.
And the hotels and motels.
So Dave, did you want to take, in 16, did you want to take research labs out because it's already listed in 16 too? Is that what that was it's a
He's
suggestion.
eliminating 16.1 though, right?
No, we're gonna keep 16.
Oh, no, we're just keeping 16.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could get rid of that 16.2.
You want to get rid of 16 too, or keep it?
Yeah, no, I think it's
Just for
fine.
research, just for research, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more uses in 16.2, B1, I1, 2, 3, right? And in 16, it's only 1, 2, and 3, and,
Yeah, so let's leave it in.
okay. You want to take research labs out of 16? And move it, keep it in, because it's just redundant, I think was your comment,
Right.
okay? Huh.
So are we keeping,
almost-
are we keeping 16?
I don't know,
It's
It's almost
the
it's
same
al-
as the other two.
yeah, you're right, 16,
It's the same as,
16.1 and 16.2, if you just
Yeah.
put research into 16.1,
It's
then
just-
it's, right?
yep.
So leave 16, right, Chris?
I would take 16 out
Take 16 out?
and leave the other.
Well, the point is that in the manufacturing part, I think that's what Dave was trying to
Oh, gotcha.
explain. Leave the manufacturing in under 16 for all the categories as just manufacturing. 16.1 then adds the ability to fix, repair, and sell in the business zones, which you don't do as a manufacturer in 16, but you allow it in 16.1 to go into business zones to be able to sell your product. And
Yeah.
subordinate to that would be manufacturing, if, in the case of the guns, or in that example. but 16.1 and 16.2 seem to say the same thing. Other than not being allowed in B2 zone for 16.2.
Yeah, so you allow the laboratory to be in the B1 zone.
But not in B2.
Right.
So, I don't know the reason for that, but couldn't tell you.
We don't want you manufacturing in the business zone, but a research lab is just gonna be quiet and not make a whole lot of noise and dirt and dust and, right?
Depends on what they're researching.
Okay.
Researching like,
Well, let's leave it in there for the moment. We can
Fair
let the,
enough.
let the public weigh in.
All right. Hotel's a big one.
Commercial zones, B and I.
Yeah.
Commercial zones, B and I. All B and I.
Yeah, it's only allowed in B1 and I3.
Oh, B1 and I. Well, we're getting rid of I through
Which I guess is all right. The I3 is the big industrial zone. You got a big hotel motel, that would be good. You don't really want it in the smaller ones. And you don't really want it in a B2, which would be Northford Center. Why wouldn't we want to have a bed, well, we could have a bed and breakfast would work there. Should we add a bed and breakfast under hospitality? It's in our zoning regulations that it's allowed. So we should definitely land it somewhere, right?
Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
We were adding hotels to B2 as well, and I2, is that right, Bill? Is that what you're saying?
You said B1 and I3.
That's where they are now.
That's where they're at. Yeah.
But I'm not sure if you really want a hotel motel in the B2 zone, but you may want to have a bed and breakfast. That's why I was
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good.
thinking bed and breakfast, or a boutique.
So bed and breakfast in B1, B2 then, right?
Yep.
Okay. So goes S, special permit? Or, I don't,
Cut off. Administrative. It's cut off, I can't, I was trying to
oh, right,
remember what that is.
you're right. Let's see what this one says. Here we go. So S is the site plan versus, so Dave, you wanted to change hotels to special permit, not a site plan, because right now it's a site plan, right? under hotels and motels. I think that was the point you were trying to make on it, because we didn't change it in its location, B1 and I3, but it's by site plan only.
You want to make it a
You're
special
suggesting
permit?
You're suggesting a special permit?
I would think it should be a special permit.
So it would be a U instead of an S, right?
Yep.
So maybe this is a discussion for another time, because it's running late. Should we look at the residential uses again? For me, based on what he was just saying, like converting old buildings into residential units, allowing certain things in the business zone, in one of the B zone, like, I don't know, I'm just thinking of other uses,
Multifamily.
like if they convert the strip mall into a, you know,
Yeah,
apartments
housing.
or housing,
Mhm.
is that something we should consider? As a, or is that something like a,
So the grand idea, Chris, is that we were going to look at specifically the strip malls, right? Because really, specifically, it's Northford Center, right? And certain portions along Route 80 in
Yeah.
North Branford, right?
yeah,
I know we were trying to revamp and create a mixed use, we call it, in Northford Center, and redo that overlay district, and then be able to create something that has all those components to it and lay it where
Over.
we want to use it. That would apply to what Scott
Okay.
was trying to
Okay.
explain, but yes, it makes sense to have that as a reg, but right now we don't have that.
It would be an overlay, so it would be
Got
a
it.
special overlay.
Yep.
Right.
Other
right.
than, what- yeah.
yeah.
Instead of us saying where it is, we're gonna-
It'll
this is the
just-
parameters.
That's where it, okay.
Yeah.
We'll land it here.
So we also have the A2, the multiple dwelling units, consisting of 2 or more dwelling units that are allowed in the B1 and the B2 zone. So those could be above strip malls, like the new apartments we just did up behind the gas station in Northford at the Triangle, with the 6
Okay.
apartments
Yep.
up above and the 2 stores down below. So they could come before us now and convert a strip mall. In fact, we should tell them about that.
Right. Yep.
Because the same thing with those malls, there's a concern of signage out in front and how much signage there is and how far back the stores are, and so they have all the sandwich boards
Yeah,
out in front. And what can we do to convert that? Well, you can have a 4x8 sign out in front of your building advertising who's in the building. Is that big enough, 4x8?
For the number of businesses.
I guess it, yeah.
It's only that much of a space,
Probably not, right?
right?
So we should probably look at that. And of course, it's going to be up to the landlord to build that sign and make it such that everybody in there is getting their fair shake on the sign.
Right.
So it's not just the zoning regulations that's the impediment, it's the landlord who needs to pay the money and build the sign.
Right. That was our conversations in the Northford study was, we're just a pass-through. No one stops in there because it's too dangerous. God knows what there's in there. If they see the sign, if they recognize and they pull in, but again, it's a dangerous situation to get in there, but a sign would definitely help drive more traffic into that strip mall, no doubt about it. Last one, Dave, I3, I2?
I think we can discuss that further.
Okay.
I mean, I think most of the I3 We'll have to, I was gonna bring the map, but I didn't bring it in. But I think most of the I-3 is really developed.
Right. Yeah, I think, isn't there, you had,
Is Tilcon one of it? Sorry. Is Tilcon I3?
I-1.
I won.
Oh, I1, yeah.
They had the whole
Right,
category,
right, right.
basically.
That's what I was thinking.
Didn't you create I must be thinking of something else, when you categorize how many categories are in, I think it was, must be
Yeah.
R40B1, different conversation, okay. But-
Yeah, because the I-3s, there are not that many lots.
No, yep, okay. Have that another conversation,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, no, I'll do that up again, that list, and get it out before the next meeting, because that would be part of the table of uses conversation.
Okay. All right. Commissioners, have any other questions, comments on what we went over? So far, so good? Okay, Dave, let's move on to Town Center form-based code presentation and discussion. You want to move that on to next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Has anybody looked at that
I,
stuff?
well, I've looked at some of the handouts, yeah. I haven't watched the video yet, but maybe we'll.
We can table that to the next meeting and keep having a conversation about it. While we're talking about that, any update from the state, SCROG, all those people for the Town Center study? Not really, right?
No, we're waiting for the budget,
Oh, that's right, my bad.
for the survey to get approved, and then we can move forward after that.
Okay. I'll move on to item 8, Town Planners Report.
No,
No?
no.
You're not gonna do it? Or you have nothing to share?
I have nothing to share.
All right.
All right, so.
I have
basi-
no new applications.
Okay, gotcha. So we'll be having this conversation on what we discussed today and moving forward. All right. With that being said, we're on to the last item on the agenda, item 9, adjournment.
Before we get into that, I just want to bring it to everyone's attention. Did you ever settle that, you're going to have a table?
I said considered. I
Okay.
revised the minutes to say considered.
I realize we have another meeting before it, but there's going to be Earth Day celebration, April 26th at Wall Field. I'm sorry I don't have any times, but it's coming up real quick.
Mhm. Tuesday, the 22nd, so. Yep.
That's it. I motion we adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Second.
Second? Oh, second and thank you. Sorry. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you guys for coming. Thanks, Bill.
Oh, I made it.